My husband stood up at Easter brunch and mocked my $743 salary in front of 19 relatives. He had no idea I had already filed. April 20th, 2025, 11:47 a.m. The Ashworth family dining room on Mineral Springs Road in Durham smelled like brown sugar ham and the lilies Gail had cut from the backyard that morning. 19 people sat around two tables pushed together, porcelain clinking, kids grabbing rolls, when my husband Derek stood up with a mimosa in his hand and said the sentence that ended his marriage in front of everyone he'd ever tried to impress. I didn't flinch. I'd been waiting 11 days for this exact moment. But let me go back. I started at Ridgewood Elementary in August 2014. Fresh out of UNC's special education program, 23 years old, stupid enough to believe the $34,200 starting salary was temporary. 11 years later, I earned $38,636 annually. After taxes, health insurance, and my mandatory state pension contribution, that came out to $743.18 per week, deposited into our joint account at First Horizon Bank on Roxborough Road. I knew the number by heart because Derek made sure I did. He joined Prestige Flooring Southeast as an outside rep in 2016. By 2021, he'd climbed to regional sales manager covering the Triangle and Triad territories. Base salary, $94,000, plus quarterly bonuses that ranged from $6,000 to $11,500. He drove a company-subsidized 2022 F-150 Lariat. He wore Vineyard Vines polos to cookouts, and he reminded me, gently at first, then not gently at all, that his income kept the lights on. The imbalance showed up in small cuts. November 2022. I asked to enroll our daughter Maisie, who was 5 at the time, in Saturday gymnastics at Triangle Gymnastics Academy, $165 a month. Derek looked up from his phone and said, "Find it in your paycheck." I found it in my paycheck. Maisie did gymnastics for 7 months before I couldn't keep it up. March 2023. My 2009 Honda Civic needed a $2,100 transmission repair. Derek told me to pull it from the savings account I'd built over 3 years by skipping classroom supply reimbursements and pocketing the difference. 3 years of packing my own lunches and buying discount markers. Gone in one repair. August 2024. I wanted to attend a 4-day SPED conference in Charlotte. Registration was $475. We were at a backyard barbecue, and I brought it up casually, thinking a crowd might soften him. Derek turned to his younger brother Kyle, who's an HVAC technician out in Apex, and said, "What's the ROI on that?" Kyle laughed. I didn't. Each time the message landed the same way. Your money is small, so your voice is small. By fall 2024, I'd stopped arguing, but I started watching. 2 things didn't add up. First, Derek's spending had outpaced his stated income by a wide margin. He bought a $4,200 Peloton in September. He paid cash for a weekend fishing trip to Nag's Head in October. $1,900 on the Amex statement I found in the recycling bin. Yet, when I asked about replacing the dishwasher that had been broken since July, he shook his head and said, "We can't swing it right now, Corinne. You know that." Second, his phone went face down every single time it buzzed after 9 p.m. Every time. He'd been doing it since at least August, but I only let myself notice in October. There's a difference between seeing something and letting yourself see it. November 3, 2024. A Sunday. Derek was in the shower. I was sitting on the bed, folding Maisie's leotards, when his Apple Watch lit up on the nightstand. Venmo notification. Payment to J. Cordes, $1,200. The memo line said, "For the lease, babe." For the lease, babe. I sat there for about 4 seconds. Maisie's pink leotard in my lap, the shower running behind the bathroom door, steam curling out from the gap at the bottom. I picked up my phone, opened the camera, and took one photograph of that watch screen. Then I set the leotard on the stack, walked downstairs, and made Lucas a peanut butter sandwich. He was 4. He wanted the crusts cut off. I cut the crusts off. I didn't say a word to Derek that night.
Not the next morning, either. Not for the next 5 months. That photograph became the first page in a folder I would spend 4 months building quietly, carefully, and without a single mistake. A folder Derek never knew existed until it was already sitting in front of a judge in the Durham County Courthouse. December 9, 2024. I sat in my Civic in the Ridgewood Elementary parking lot after dismissal. Engine off. Hands shaking so bad I had to press them flat against my thighs. During my planning period that afternoon, while my kids were at specials, I'd pulled up the Durham County Register of Deeds website on my classroom laptop and run a search I'd been putting off for 5 weeks. A lease agreement for a 1-bedroom apartment at the Columns at Crabtree in Raleigh came up on the 3rd page of results. Derek M. Ashworth listed as guarantor. Jenna R. Cordes listed as tenant. Signed August 14, 2024. Monthly rent, $1,850. August. He'd been paying for this woman's apartment since August. The same month he told me the SPED conference was too expensive. The same month his phone started going face down. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Mangum Street downtown and walked into the offices of Whitfield and Greer. I didn't have an appointment. The receptionist, a young woman with braids and a Carolina lanyard, told me Marcus Whitfield had a cancellation at 4:15. I sat in a leather chair for 40 minutes, holding my phone with the Apple Watch photo pulled up and the lease printout folded in my lap. Marcus Whitfield had spent 16 years in family law. Former Wake County Assistant DA before that. He was maybe 50, gray at the temples, reading glasses on a chain. He looked at both documents without saying anything for a long time. Then he leaned back and said 5 words. "We need a forensic accountant." I nodded like I knew what that meant. I didn't. Not yet. That evening, I tested Derek. I needed to see how he'd react. Maisie and Lucas were already in bed. We were eating reheated Costco lasagna at the kitchen island, standing up because that's how we ate when it was just us. No ceremony left. "Derek, I want to refinance the Civic. Can I see our savings balance?" He didn't look up from his plate. "Why do you need to see it?" "Because my name's on the account too." "I'll send you a screenshot later. Don't worry about it." "You always say later." He set his fork down, looked at me the way you look at a child who won't stop asking for something in a store. "Because you always ask at the worst time, Corinne. Just trust me." Trust me. He actually said, "Trust me." I didn't ask again. I didn't need to. His refusal confirmed what I already suspected. The numbers in that account wouldn't match what he'd been telling me, and he knew it. And he knew that I'd know it if I saw them. That was enough. I spent that night in the bathroom with the exhaust fan running so Derek wouldn't hear me typing. I sat on the edge of the tub and Googled forensic accountant Durham NC divorce. The third result was Patricia Lau, CPA, CFE, 28 years in practice, office on Chapel Hill Road. Her website listed a specialty in what she called tracing marital dissipation and hidden asset streams. I emailed her at 11:48 p.m. from my personal Gmail, the one Derek didn't know existed. Patricia responded by 7 a.m. the next morning. I have Thursday at 2. Bring bank statements, tax returns, and anything with account numbers. I had access to exactly none of that, but I knew where Derek kept the fireproof lockbox. Top shelf of the garage, behind the 3 boxes of Christmas decorations we hadn't touched since the year before. On December 11th, while Derek was at a client dinner in Greensboro, I pulled the box down, opened it with the key he kept in his tackle box, and photographed every document inside. 3 years of bank statements, 2 brokerage account summaries, his 2023 W-2 showing total compensation of $118,400. I put everything back exactly as I found it and locked the box. Patricia Lau was 62 years old and operated out of a second-floor office on Chapel Hill Road that smelled like Earl Grey and printer toner. She'd testified in over 140 divorce proceedings across Wake, Durham, and Orange counties. When I spread the photographed documents across her desk that Thursday, she put on her reading glasses and went quiet for almost 10 minutes. Then she tapped one of the brokerage statements with her index finger. There's a second current account here. See this transfer pattern? Every 2 weeks, same amount going out. That's not a bill, Mrs. Ashworth. That's a person. I told her I knew who the person was. By January 15th, 2025, Patricia had traced 17 wire transfers totaling $214,600 from our joint brokerage account into a Capital One checking account Derek had opened alone, an account whose mailing address was Apartment 4C at The Columns at Crabtree, Raleigh. Jenna Cordis's apartment, the one my husband had been paying for since August, while telling me we couldn't afford a dishwasher. The next 10 weeks were the quietest and loudest of my life. Quiet because I never said a word to Derek. Loud because inside my head, every single day was a countdown. December 18. Patricia subpoenaed the Capital One records through Marcus's office. The account had been opened in June 2023. Sole holder, Derek M. Ashworth. Beneficiary listed as Jenna R. Cordis. June 2023. That meant he'd been hiding money for over a year before he even signed her lease. I read that detail on my phone during lunch while my students were in the cafeteria, and I had to set the phone down and press my palms against the desk until the ringing in my ears stopped. January 6th. Marcus filed a verified discovery motion under North Carolina General Statute 50-21, requiring full financial disclosure within 30 days. Derek never saw it. The filing triggered a clock, and that clock was mine. January 22nd. My colleague, Anita Reeves, the school counselor at Ridgewood, 9 years in the building, pulled me aside in the hallway near the water fountains. She said I'd lost weight. She said I looked like I wasn't sleeping. She didn't push. She just wrote a name on a sticky note and said, Duke's Employee Assistance Program. They take our insurance. Tuesdays at 5 work best with your schedule. I started going. Every Tuesday. I never told Derek where I was. He never asked. February 4th. Patricia completed her full dissipation report. 42 pages. I sat in her Earl Grey office and watched her turn each one. Transfers, lease payments, a $9,400 jewelry purchase at Bailey's Fine Jewelry in Raleigh from December 2023. 2 Delta flights to Miami in February 2024, $2,860 total.
I thought about the transmission repair I'd paid for with 3 years of lunch money, and I had to look at the ceiling for a moment. March 1st. Marcus filed the divorce petition with Durham County Superior Court. Case number 25-CVD-1847. He asked if I wanted to serve Derek immediately. I said no. Not yet. I wanted to choose the moment. Marcus nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. March 27th. Marcus obtained a domestic asset preservation order from Judge Teresa Clifton. It would freeze all accounts tied to Derek's name effective April 17. 21 days away. I marked it on the calendar in my classroom with a small green dot that meant nothing to anyone but me. And while all of this was happening, Derek got worse. March 8th. Dinner at Gail's house with Kyle and his girlfriend. Derek leaned back in his chair, belly full, and announced he was thinking about upgrading to a Tahoe because the F-150's getting old. He looked at me when he said it, like he wanted me to react. I cut my pork chop and said nothing. March 22nd. A Saturday night. Kids asleep. Derek on the couch, scrolling his phone, feet up on the coffee table I'd refinished myself 2 summers ago. Without looking up, he said, "You should pick up tutoring on weekends if you want to take the kids to the beach this summer. I can't bankroll everything forever." I said, "Okay." I went upstairs. I brushed my teeth. I got in bed. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the 42-page report locked in Patricia's filing cabinet. The last one came April 5th, Maisie's Saturday soccer game at Northgate Park. Derek was standing with 2 other dads near the sideline, arms crossed, sunglasses on. I was 10 feet away on the bleachers with Lucas on my lap when I heard him say it, loud enough that he wanted me to hear. "My wife's a saint, but she makes less than my quarterly bonus. Someone's got to keep the math working." One of the dads laughed. The other looked at the ground. I stared at the field, jaw tight. I reached into my pocket and texted Marcus with one hand. "I want to serve him at Easter." Marcus replied in 4 minutes. "Already prepared. Filing Thursday the 17th. You'll have the stamped order by Friday." On April 11th, Patricia sent her final supplemental report. Buried in the Capital One statements, she found one more thing.
A $34,000 wire on January 3, 2025, to something called Cordis Property Holdings, LLC, a company registered to Jenna Cordis's mother. Derek had used joint retirement funds to help his girlfriend's family buy a rental property in Clayton. Patricia flagged it in red ink. Marital dissipation, retirement asset, no spousal consent. NC General Statute 50-20C1. Marcus's plan was precise. Serve Derek nothing before Easter. Let him feel comfortable. Let him perform. The notarized asset freeze order, stamped April 17, case 25-CVD-1847, signed by Judge Clifton, would be my only prop. No shouting, no tears, no speech. Just paper, placed calmly at the moment of maximum contrast. Right after he humiliated my salary in front of his whole family, I would show him I'd already frozen every dollar he'd tried to hide. I rehearsed the moment once. April 16, parked outside Patricia's office in my Civic. I practiced keeping my hands still. I practiced not smiling. Anita Reeves, 41, 9 years at Ridgewood, became the only person at work who knew something was coming. She never asked for details. She covered my recess duty on court filing days without being asked. She brought me coffee on hard mornings. On Friday, April 18, 2 days before brunch, she sat with me in the teacher's lounge during 4th period and said, "Whatever happens Sunday, you've already done the hardest part." I squeezed her hand and didn't trust myself to speak. Saturday night, April 19. Kids in bed by 8. Derek watching basketball in the living room. I went upstairs, ironed my green linen dress, and hung it on the closet door. Then I opened my handbag, took out the notarized order Marcus had couriered to the school that afternoon, and tucked it between my wallet and a pack of tissues. I set my alarm for 7 a.m. and lay down next to a man who had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow, I'd let Derek give his toast.
Easter Sunday, April 20th, 2025. I wore the green linen dress. I put on mascara for the first time in weeks. I strapped Lucas into his car seat and let Maisie ride up front because she'd been asking since January, and I figured today she deserved something small. Derek drove separately because he'd gone to the gym that morning and said he'd meet us there. He always had a reason to drive separately. Gail's dining room was loud. 19 people. 2 tables pushed together, covered in her good china, the set she only brought out for Easter and Christmas. Brown sugar ham, deviled eggs, a fruit salad nobody touched, lilies in a mason jar at the center. Overlapping conversations, kids grabbing rolls, Kyle's girlfriend talking about a cruise she'd booked. Derek had 2 mimosas in him before the ham was even carved. At 11:47, he picked up a butter knife and clinked it against his glass. The room quieted. He stood. I just want to say, I'm grateful for this family. I work hard so we can all be here together, and maybe... He grinned at me across the table. That grin, the one he used when he thought he was charming. Maybe if my wife earned more than $743 a week, I wouldn't have to cover everything. But hey, that's what husbands are for, right? Scattered laughter. Uncomfortable laughter. Kyle looked at his plate. Gail smiled the way she always did when Derek said something she should have corrected, but wouldn't. Derek's Uncle Ray chuckled into his napkin. I felt 19 pairs of eyes land on me and then look away. I waited 3 seconds. I counted them. Then I reached into my handbag, pulled out a single tri-folded document, and placed it next to Derek's mimosa glass. He looked down at it, still half smiling. What is this? That's a notarized asset freeze order, signed by Judge Teresa Clifton on April 17th. Every account with your name on it is frozen, including the Capital One account you opened for Jenna Cordis at the Columns at Crabtree in Raleigh. The room went dead. Not quiet, dead. I heard the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I heard a bird outside the window. Gail's fork hit her plate with a ceramic clink, and she didn't pick it up. I filed for divorce last Thursday, Derek. My attorney is Marcus Whitfield at Whitfield and Greer. You'll be served formally tomorrow morning, but I wanted you to have this now. I kept my hands still, just like I'd practiced. Since you like making financial announcements in front of the family... Derek's face went white. Not red, white. Corinne, what? You can't just... I can. I did. Enjoy your brunch. I stood up. I walked around the table. I kissed Maisie on the top of her head. I kissed Lucas on his cheek. I picked up my handbag, and I walked out Gail's front door onto Mineral Springs Road, and I got in my 2009 Honda Civic, and I drove home to the house on Holloway Drive, and I sat in the driveway for 15 minutes with the engine running before I let myself cry. Within 6 weeks, everything moved. Derek was formally served April 21st at his office. His attorney was a general practitioner from Cary who handled real estate closings and traffic tickets. He was outmatched by Whitfield and Greer before the first hearing even started. Judge Clifton ruled the $214,600 in transfers constituted marital dissipation under North Carolina General Statute 5020. Derek received 0 credit for those funds in equitable distribution. The house on Holloway Drive, appraised at $485,000, was awarded to me. Derek's F-150 was sold and the proceeds split. $187,000 in joint retirement funds were awarded entirely to me because of Derek's unauthorized $34,000 withdrawal to Cordis Property Holdings. I got primary custody of Maisie and Lucas. Derek got alternating weekends. Jenna Cordis vacated the apartment at the Columns by May 30th. The lease was not renewed. In late May, Derek texted me. "Can we talk? I know I messed up. I want to fix this for the kids." I read it at the kitchen table.
Maisie was doing homework. Lucas was building a tower out of cereal boxes. I waited until the next morning to reply. "You can fix things for the kids by showing up on your weekends and paying support on time. That's the only conversation left." He didn't text again. October 2025, 6 months later. I was sitting on the porch of a yellow cottage on Onslow Street, 3 blocks from Ridgewood Elementary. Close enough that Maisie could ride her bike to school. Lucas was inside watching Bluey. The dishwasher worked. The Civic had new tires. I'd repainted the front door myself on a Saturday, while Anita Reeves sat on the steps and handed me a beer. I'd started a weekend tutoring group, not because Derek told me to, because 3 of my former students' parents asked, and I said yes. I charged $40 an hour. I kept every dollar in an account with only my name on it at a bank Derek had never heard of. Derek thought $743 a week made me powerless. He announced it like a punchline at Easter brunch in front of 19 people, expecting the room to laugh with him. What he didn't understand, what he never once understood, was that I hadn't been sitting quietly all those months. I'd been building quietly. And by the time he stood up to mock my salary, I'd already sat down with a forensic accountant, a family attorney, and a judge. The mimosa was still cold when his entire life changed.